So, yeah, we
All
will
right.
we will basically be talking about what a RoboCamp is. So basically, a RoboCamp is anything that inspires younger students throughout your community. It can be anything from just a science experiment to building an actual robot and coding it. So there's no cookie cutter RoboCamp. So through our presentation, we'll be talking about what we have learned and what experiences we went through, as well as just very broad terms and things that we use during our RoboCamps. No software and hardware stuff that we had access to, but you guys might not. And so we'll just share our insight through the years of running this camp. So why do we have RoboCamps? We use RoboCamps to educate kids about STEAM and to educate counselors on communication skills. Our outreach priorities is to do community service throughout the community, since our team is based off of outreach, as well as making kids aware of our high school team to show that there's something that they can look forward to and there's a pathway to use. As well as we use it for team funding, since people do have to pay for our camp services.
All right. Maybe we'll trade spots here.
Okay.
All right. So running a RoboCamp is kind of like, it's a project, okay? So just like building a robot is a project, or building, I don't know if you do any kind of construction in your garage or backyard, building tree houses, or even a homework project, it's a project. So kind of three main elements of a project. The scope. What are you actually going to do? What do you want to accomplish? How are you going to meet your goals? You need a set of goals of what you want your camp to do, who your target audience is. There's going to be a certain amount of time that you have to plan it, and that will limit your scope. And then there's going to be a cost to implement your camp, and that also will limit your scope. And there's kind of a trade-off between your scope and the cost and time that you have available to run your camp, and the quality, the level of the camp that you're able to produce with that big a scope for that much time and money. So good planning is of the essence to be able to pull it off successfully, ultimately. So we're going to talk a little bit about the who's, what's, when's, where's, and how's of camps. The who's is the collaborators. That is, who will actually be running your camp and who are you running it for. The when's and where's are kind of the logistics. How do you set up an event like this? How much, that's your budgeting process, because you will probably be buying supplies and expending money to run a RoboCamp. And if you are charging a registration fee, which we recommend, depending on the ability of your community to pay, or to get sponsorships to cover the cost of the camps, you will hopefully actually make a little bit of a profit then, which you can plow back into expanding your camps, supporting other outreach, or possibly even supporting your team as a whole. We'll talk a little bit about communication methods in order to promote and run your camp. And we're going to talk about the camp content. In other words, what do you actually do in the camp? So we're going to start with collaborators. That is, who you rely on to run the camps. Basically, especially if you're just starting, it's really hard to start something completely on your own. So I am a huge believer in partnerships. Wherever you are, you will have some other organizations that have an aligned motive with yours, an aligned goal. And you need to identify who those are and be able to partner with them to help run and promote your program. So how many of you have a school district that you're affiliated with? How many of you don't have a school district you're affiliated with? Okay. So you might be the exception, but pretty much everybody has a school district who's got a mission to educate kids, right? What are you doing in RoboCamps? You're educating kids. So there is a natural partnership, and you want to leverage that as much as possible. Yep. Annika, your turn.
So the first question that has to be answered are enough people interested? So this starts with the amount of kids that would be interested. If you don't have a bunch of kids interested, then you can't hold a camp, as well as students on your team. You have to take a gauge and see how many people are interested in running these camps, are interested in getting these kids to where they can be interested in STEM and everything else. Another thing that you can do if you don't have enough people is on your team that are interested is to pay people to run the camp, which we'll get into later. So who's in charge? Who is running the camp would probably 90% of the time will be an adult, since they have to.
Go ahead.
They have to handle money, permits, and just dealing with school districts and the equipment you'll be using. So it's a lot easier to get an adult to run it than to get a student to run it. Another thing is we don't recommend one person doing everything. It's a lot of work, so having a team that's willing to put this forward and be willing to get these kids interested would be a lot more beneficial and a lot more helpful on your mental health and just overall having a good camp experience. It's also the person that the counselors will be looking to for advice. So you will have an adult at the camps if you're doing a week, if you're doing a day, and this adult will be like will know the material, and if there's anything that you don't understand or another camp counselor doesn't understand, they can go up to the adult and be like, hey, I don't understand this, and have the adult help the kid. So another section on who will run the camp is the camp counselors. These camp counselors will be doing all of the actual hands-on work. They will be interacting with the kids the majority of the time. We recommend one counselor per 4 to 8 campers. You would also need 1 to 2 head counselors, which plan out the schedule, put every other camp counselor in roles and jobs, so that can be emceeing, working with the kids on code, helping build, refereeing, field reset, depending on what you're doing. And then we also recommend 1 to 2 like floaters or backups, so that if one camp counselor is helping a team and one of their maybe other teams need help, that floater or that backup can go and help that team, so that nobody's waiting on a camp counselor to help. This is training kind of technical and soft skills. So technical being working with the robot and understanding the materials. We use Vex robots, but you can also use like Legos or anything else. And so that gets the counselors engaged and help. And then the soft skills of where it's communication and making sure that they can communicate well and work with the campers. They also handle many safety or behavior problems, oh my God, and any parent conflicts, which will usually be done by the head counselors or the adult if there has to be a call home, or we'll get into more behavioral ways to figure out behavioral problems later.
We're going to do the do-si-do throughout the presentation.
Yeah.
All right. So logistics. We had a quote: "Planning is a skill and an art. It takes a lifetime to master." That makes planning sound intimidating. It isn't really. You don't need to worry about everything being perfect, but you don't need to sweat the little stuff. Think about the big things, your goals, and some of the main factors, which we'll go over in just a moment here. We're basically focusing on the big stuff. There will be lots of details And a lot of that will be specific to your specific camp. And frankly, you're going to learn as you go what works and what doesn't. For example, HDMI setups.
Yay.
Okay, so starting with the where, you need a place, right? You need a classroom or some sort of room where you can set up a camp. That will depend a little bit on the size of the camp that you have in mind. And there's a trade-off, right? You might have to limit the size in order to fit within the space that's available, or at a minimum, you're going to look for a space that's big enough to accommodate the size of camp that you want. We strongly recommend looking for a location well in advance because you're going to want to advertise. When you advertise your camp, you want to be able to tell people where that camp will be, right? I talked earlier about partner agencies or partner organizations. So if you can work with your school district to use an otherwise unused classroom, or better yet, a multi-purpose room where you can spread out. Often they won't charge rent. They will charge for insurance and possibly custodial fees. So you do have to consider that in your budget. But typically you can get it for no rent. If you aren't affiliated with a school district, it'll be a little bit more challenging to find a place where you can run your camps that's big enough to accommodate the size of camps that you want to run. We'll get into the size more in a little bit. But at a minimum, it needs to be able to accommodate the number of campers you have, tables for them to work on their robots or other STEM activities, and if there's any sort of competitions, of course you want competitions, right? You need space for the competition fields as well. Ideally, you want a place that has somewhere other than where the camp is set up for kids to take their recess, have meal breaks or snack breaks, and just generally, ideally, get outside and run around and let off steam in between camp activities. So you need inside space and other inside space or outdoor space or both. Finally, again, there's a trade-off between what spaces you want and when they're available. Does it fit with the times that you want your camps? Okay, so we talked about I think I skipped over the wins. I skipped over the wins. Okay, we'll do wins. When will you have your camp? What do you think is the biggest demand for summer camps?
Summer.
Right, because that's when parents are looking for childcare, kids are out of school, you guys are presumably out of school and maybe have spare time to run camps. Summer, sometimes spring break works, but that's your kind of target time frame when camps are going to be most successful. Next, you want to figure out how long are you going to run camps for. We've found, for us, planning in 1 week blocks seems to work. 1 week is long enough that you can get through a curriculum of teaching kids to build and iterate and program and compete with a robot within a 1 week time frame, typically. And then anything longer than that, they might get bored, or you're going to have a hard time coming up with enough curriculum to fill more than a week. How many days a week? Again, if it's a 1 week long class or camp, typically 5 days a week. In the summer, we've got 4th of July, we've got now Juneteenth, which are typically federal and or school holidays. So you may need to rearrange your schedule to work around holidays. We found, at least in our school district, they will not let us rent a classroom over the 4th of July holiday. And frankly, most parents have other plans for their kids and they don't want them in a camp on the holiday anyway. So there's a little planning constraint there. How long? For our target audience is typically 4th to 8th graders. They can typically handle about the length of a school day, say roughly 9 to 3. That work. You could even extend it 9 to 4 maybe, say 7 hours. That's about probably the limit of what kids can kind of focus on, even with breaks and even with fun activities. I mean, how long are your school days? Anybody have a school day longer than 7 hours?
7.5.
Oh, wow. And how is that? Right.
Every day is block day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So camp will probably be kind of like that. So we've also recently started setting up camps for kindergartners to third graders. Those we set up as half-day camps. So we can run 2 half-day camps in a day. Again, kindergartners will typically have, they'll have a shorter schedule. So, kindergarten, I don't know, when my kids were in school anyway, kindergarten was a half day. When I was in school, it was a half day. That's about kind of the time frame you want to plan on. So things to keep in mind as you're planning your camp. Also, when you're scheduling, again, when is your preferred venue available? You're going to have to work around the venue availability, and when is there a demand for camps?
All right, so the last question is who? So what age groups? This can take into account the location space, the available number of counselors, and then the budget restrictions. Younger kids may have more behavioral issues, so you will probably need more counselors to handle younger kids. We just started our K through 3rd program last summer, which we only did 1 week. So it worked out well. Older kids may get bored easily. We've been working with 4th through 8th grade since those are the grades that's where our grade cap ends until they can join our team. So we add a lot of breaks. So we'll do the normal school day breaks where it's in elementary school, the 2 recesses and then the lunch in between. At that time, there will be like activities where camp counselors will hang out with the campers. So basketball seemed to be really fun. Wall ball was really fun when we were playing. And so one thing that we've learned was that kids of different age ranges don't really tend to work well together. So if you have a 4th grader working with an 8th grader, that's not going to work as well as having 2 8th graders paired. So what we like to do is we like to play the kind of age game. If you heard of it, we have the kids silently line up in how old they are or when they were born, and then we'll pair them off like that. Sometimes the kids will be very realize what you're doing and they'll try to switch so they're with their friends if they have friends in the camp. So one thing I recommend is just to kind of scout out who's friends so that you are aware of that and see if they switch. And then you can kind of be like, okay, this is where you were originally. Sometimes if they're paired with their friends, it doesn't work as well and they won't tend to get work done as much as they should. Then back to you.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about money, budgeting specifically. You can think of budget as a limit or constraint. You can also think of it as, as a constraint, it becomes, a basis for planning. So when you know how much you think you have to spend, that helps you in your decision making of how to set up the camp. So one of the questions you're going to have is, how much does it cost to run the camp? You're going to need to figure out what all the costs are, and then you're going to set your price for the camp a little bit higher, at least a little bit higher than you think it will cost to run the camp. Because obviously you want to make money on this, you don't want to lose money. That's one of the benefits of running a camp program, again, is it allows you to raise money that you can plow back into providing more camp opportunities to kids in your area, to plow back into your outreach programs, or into funding your team. You're going to need to know how many campers you expect to attend, because obviously you're going to divide the total amount you want to earn by the number of campers to be able to set a price. Within that, you then want to identify potentially, ideally you want an ability to offer scholarships. In other words, free rides to socioeconomically disadvantaged students who ideally you don't want to limit who attends just by the cost of the camp. So being able to offer scholarships is important to us so that otherwise underserved kids may still have the opportunity to attend. So we set a price that's high enough that we can plow some of the revenues back into scholarships, again, to allow more people to attend. And then you're going to also, in setting your costs, you want to look at how much do other organizations charge for similar camps in your area. There may be other summer camps offered by schools, churches, other organizations. Just survey those. Find out how much they typically charge, and that can inform your decision about how much you want to charge for your camp. So you want to be probably somewhere in the band. You can choose to be at the high end. You can choose to be at the low end. You can even choose to undercut the competition when you're getting started, if you can afford to do that, just to create kind of a, to establish your program and get it, set in the minds of the community that you have this. But, it's kind of a business decision. Where do you price this? Okay.
All
I
right.
think I skipped over another one. Just
You
a
do.
sec.
Just go.
Yeah. Okay. What should charge? What's the cost? Oh yeah. So in figuring the costs, thanks. Some of the things that some of the things that you'll need to spend money on in setting up the camps: equipment, robots, fields, possibly an AV system, and possibly you might also want to get just kind of arts and crafts or sports equipment that you can use at recess. Some of this stuff you might already have lying around or somebody can loan to the program, so when you're getting started, you don't necessarily need to go out and buy things. You might not justify the cost of buying an audiovisual system for a camp of maybe a dozen kids or even 20. Once you get up above that, maybe you're bringing in enough money that maybe you can think about buying or renting audiovisual equipment that will help running the camps easier and or more successful. I mentioned renting a venue. Again, even if you get like a school room for free, you're still probably going to be charged for insurance and custodial. Find out what those costs are and figure that into your budget. Annika mentioned often you'll need to have an adult in charge. We've typically used a school teacher who, again, with the school district, they're already plugged into the school district, so the district will trust them. Teachers know how to manage classrooms. It's a really great way to offer teachers supplemental wages for the summer, especially starting teachers who don't make as much money. You can say, hey, we can pay you to be in charge of this camp. And that becomes part of the cost. But one teacher amortized over a bunch of students over a relatively short period can be doable. Let's see. As you grow, the teacher might need another adult assistant, and that person potentially could also be paid. Again, it depends on how much you're bringing in, how you set your budget. And then again, very important for us is we want to make sure that we can plow some of the revenues in camp registrations back into scholarships so that we can allow everybody in the community at least the opportunity to be able to attend. One last thing in budgeting is everything is always more expensive than you think, and there are always unanticipated costs. So you want to build in a cushion or a contingency just for some of those unanticipated expenses. Okay, I think I got all the other budgeting things. Did we get? Oh yeah, so when you're buying stuff, some of the stuff you might need to buy, again, robots, fields, field elements, robot kits for whatever type of camp you're running, chargers if you don't already have those. You probably need some extra power strips or extension cords. Again, if you can borrow those initially, great. Eventually, you want to ensure that you have a reliable supply. So it might be worth purchasing extension cords and power strips, enough to run whatever electronic equipment, robot chargers, et cetera, that you need. But again, inventory what you already have, what possible sources you might have, because when you're starting out, you won't have as much money. So you want to identify what sources you have that will limit the amount of stuff that you actually need to buy. Some things might come with the venue, like tables. If you don't have a venue with tables, then you need to figure out where you're going to get tables if you want tables. If there is anything you need to buy, be sure that you identify that and order it well in advance. You don't want to be sitting around at 8 o'clock the morning of your first camp wondering, gee, when are my robot kits going to arrive, right? Okay, next.
So the next thing we're going to be talking about is communication. So one of the things big on communication is advertisement. We have talked about it a few times. There are multiple different ways to advertise. You can do like Google Forms, you can do flyers, you can do if you guys have a website or if you guys have a social media. We found it really helpful for having a team email account where campers can just ask questions. So we'll have somebody who is working just overall all the RoboCamps, and we'll take those emails and put them where they need to be for what weeks. One thing that we cannot stress enough is starting early. If you don't start early enough, then people already have plans over the summer, or they'll already be in certain camps, and then you can't get more people inside of your camps, as well as word of mouth. I don't know how many times I've got to work with a kid, and then when we go into one of our other outreach projects, they come over with a big group of friends, and it's like, this is what I did over the weekend, or this is what I did over the summer, let me show you, and they'll show their friends like what they did, and it's really heartwarming to see it, as well as it just gets it out more so that more kids are interested in just overall robotics and the camps.
Annika, when do we start advertising?
We are going to start advertising, I think, in probably the end of December almost. We are currently trying to figure out who is going to be running these RoboCamps for our students, because it is student-led, working with adults, as well as we'll start figuring out what venues we're going to do, what competitions, and everything like that.
And when do we open registration?
It's
usually in March. For
Okay.
our summer camps. We start registration in March. So that's how much the planning horizon. And everything, of course, needs to be, the times and the places need to be set before we open registration in March. So that's how far ahead you need to plan and advertise.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of registration, registration is a process. It's obviously important because you want to know who's going to attend your camps, right? And you want to kind of get them locked in and ideally paid for well before the camps start. So the easy startup way is just set up a Google form, right? Everyone has access, hopefully, to a Google account or can set up a Google account easily. Google Forms are easy to set up. You advertise with a link to a Google form. People sign up. And then you can send them an invoice, basically, or a PayPal link or something, to get them to pay. Really easy to set up. It's a little bit harder to manage the information because you end up with a spreadsheet, but all you end up with is a spreadsheet. And sometimes a Google form doesn't seem as official. So as your camps grow, and hopefully, again, you're earning a little bit of profit that you can plow back into the camps, you might consider then upgrading to using an event planning service. We've used a couple. Actually, we started with Eventbrite. We ended up switching to TicketTailor because it was a little bit cheaper. Both of them are, they take a service fee off the top, Um, it's not an unreasonable service fee, and there are a lot of benefits, but it really only makes sense once your camps get larger. So the big thing with the kind of an event platform is, there's a little bit of a service fee, typically around 1 to 3%. It's more complicated to set up initially because you have to set up an account, link it to a payment platform typically, and program. Whoops. Sorry.
That's okay.
You're going to link it to a payment program, and you're going to, you're going to need to kind of program stuff into it because it's more than just a blank slate. But it does have a bunch of features that will help you manage your camps, for example, wait lists, again, links to payment platforms, and then your payment platform will be a separate thing. So again, you can either use a form and just invoice people and have them pay separately, or you can link that. You'll need to set up an account with PayPal or Stripe or something like that to be able to collect payment. Ideally, you want everybody paid for before the camp starts, because otherwise, if they're not paid for or on scholarship or otherwise sponsored, you need to drop them and bring the space up for somebody else. So that's part of the registration management.
All right. So next thing we're going to be talking about is camp content. We kind of talked about this already. So what will the campers be doing? This can be anything from design, programming, teamwork, just learning about STEM. We have 2 just separate programming weeks so that we can focus more on programming. And it seems to get the kids who join the regular weeks, which have design, programming, and the competition at the end, to join a programming week if they're more interested in that and doing just straight programming and working with teamwork and the competition. So we usually have base activities for the age group. So the K through 3rd graders, we will do more like color sensors and just simple things where they can like kind of get interested in robots, like, oh, I'm driving something, like this is really cool. And then the older age groups, we have them build a Vex robot and work on how to code that. Not obviously with Java, because that's going to be complicated for kids to learn. We usually end up doing block code because it's a lot simpler, so that they can grasp what they're doing and they understand it more than trying to, let's say, create a whole drivetrain code, because that's not simple and cannot be done in a week. And so one main thing that you have to focus on is what is your end goal, whether it's getting them comfortable with coding, getting them able to work together as a team. Our main goal with just adding all of those up is just a competition or just a final challenge that we like to do. It gets kids like interested, like this is what we're doing, like so they're not dragging on the week like, oh, it's another day, or how many hours till we get to go home. It gets them really interested because then they can show their parents, because we invite parents over for the last few hours at the end of the competition. The older kids will get certificates based on kind of like judges award and stuff. So like the smaller VEX, like the bigger VEX competitions that we do, kind of like DYR. And so it's nice because kids are like really interested, and then they're like, oh, this is what we did. I want to do this next year, because we don't usually change as much besides the game. So how will the campers learn? We use organized lessons, so there'll be one lesson probably usually on Monday for us, of where it's like, okay, this is how you build the robot, or they'll follow along with the instructions that are already there. So we're working with the kids, as well as having a counselor sitting with the campers, communicating with them and being like, well, what if you try this? Or that doesn't seem to work, let's see if something else could. Not giving them the answer, but pushing them and kind of like nudging them towards it. The campers will be in teams. Usually it's teams of 2, so that kids can work well together and practice teamwork. Sometimes there's arguing or less contribution. The way we kind of squash that and realize it is we have somebody one of the camp counselors sit with the campers so that it's like there's a third party there. So if something happens, we're like, okay, let's stop doing that, or you can code for 15 minutes, you can build the robot for 15 minutes, and then you switch. So both campers can get the experience that they came to the camp for. And as I said before, we split up the teams with the age game. So what's the schedule? We kind of went over this already, but we usually do Monday, Friday schedule unless it's with a break. So like 4th of July, we'll end up doing that week, but we'll only do it like 4 days depending on when 4th of July is. We keep the kids focused through having breaks, as well as if they just overall need a break, like they're getting overwhelmed, we'll take them outside or something and we'll just take them for a walk so that it kind of calms them down and they're like, okay, maybe I overreacted a little bit or something. We usually have our day-to-day schedule up on a whiteboard so that they can see what's going to be happening through the day and like what hours it's happening, so that they know what's coming up next. And then we'll usually start off the morning with an icebreaker so the kids can get used to one another. This can be red light, green light. This can be Pictionary or charades. We end up switching the game every day just to make sure that the kids don't get bored, but it's something that the kids really look forward to at the beginning of the day, and times getting to the camp 30 minutes early where we can't accommodate them until later, because that's when the camp counselors get there. So one of the things I said prior was dealing with issues. As I said, kids can get bored really easily, which can sometimes lead to acting out. What we came up with is called a 2 warning system. This system is different from saying, hey, don't do this. If you're going to give somebody or a camper a warning, you're going to have to say this is your first warning to make sure that it's clear to you and them that you have a warning, and then you have to tell the head counselors and the adult supervisor that is there. Any calls home will have to be made by an adult or an adult specifically giving permission to a head counselor to do it. And it's okay to be firm as a counselor, just don't be mean. A lot of the kids will see you saying something as you're being mean, and they might bring it up to parents. But you should just be comforting, like, it's okay, but we can't do this because we're responsible for your safety. So if a kid goes running off and you can't see them, you have to make sure that they know they can't do that.
Okay. Once you've gone through one summer of running camps, you then have the ability to go back and reflect on what you did, what worked well, what didn't work so well, what can go better. And the more you document of what you did and where those potential improvements or problem issues are, the easier it will be to plan next time. So we always try to have a debrief after every week of camps, and then a larger debrief after the overall summer program has ended, so that we can take all of the lessons learned, document them, write them immediately into our plan, and then we have the plan ready to go for the next year. So having good documentation is really important to keep the program running. In addition, ideally, you're going to run the program with a variety of age or grade ranges of students from your team as counselors, so that you get that peer-to-peer learning and you're bringing up people to become head counselors. We've had also a couple of our graduates from the high school team who've come back as college students to serve as the adults or assistant adult in charge as well. So having that continuity is really important to getting the program self-sustaining. And obviously, if your program is even a little bit successful, you want to keep it going, right? So again, document everything, make a plan for the next year, collect feedback, not only as a survey to the campers or their parents rather, but also from your counselors, because the people who are running it are going to have suggestions about what worked and what didn't. The people who attended will have ideas about what they liked and maybe what they didn't. And again, train others to take over. Go ahead.
Okay, so as Mr. Solomon said, pretty much organization is key. So put yourself in kind of the shoes of like the parents. What would be the most convenient? You're not going to have like your 4th to 8th grade getting out at like noon because parents are working. So it's hard to have kids get off and be like, oh, there's no parent to pick me up. So that's why we kind of keep it to a school schedule for the 4th through 8th graders, as well as for campers. What would be the most fun? If you're sitting 7 hours just typing on code, maybe it's fun for some of you guys. I know it's kind of fun for me, but it's not going to be fun for them being like, well, I'm just sitting here typing on a computer. They're going to want to go outside. They're going to want to work with people, and they're going to want to communicate with both you and the other campers in the camp. So your base camp, as Mr. Solomon said, can expand into many others. You can start off with 1 week on your first summer, and then you can probably expand it to like 3 or 4 if it's successful. So working with that, it's perfectly great, because then you can like test it out and see how your community reacts to it. We also have different levels of camps. So we hold advanced and intro camps. Advanced camps for, say, if a student went to the camps last summer and they're like, well, I've already been through this, they can go to the advanced camp where we pose more challenges, either in code or building. We also hold WISE camps, or an all-girls camp, where we have female camp counselors, as well as all the campers are female, so that we can have more women join STEM is one of our main goals on this team. As well as I said, the coding-specific camps, which can introduce kids to working with code rather than building robots more as. And one of the main things is staying organized, like start planning in advance, as we keep saying, and having maybe a folder in a Google Drive that's specifically for RoboCamps or just your overall summer camps that you're doing, just to make sure that everything is there so you don't have to go searching for it next year. And one of our favorite quotes that we even use is steal from the best, invent the rest. So maybe you see something that you're like, oh, this is really cool, I want to try doing that, and you can, and then just kind of manipulate it into what you're doing and work with it and see how it works with your community.
Okay, well, we can try to give them the links.
Oh, could I write on the whiteboard?
Maybe. Let's see.
Working with no projector.
Yep.
Yay.
Let's see. Marker.
Nope.
Okay.
Never mind.
Is that like flower box? I have a marker in my
Oh,
backpack.
yeah.
Oh. Yeah. There we go. Okay.
So, here, I'll read it off.
Do you wanna?
Okay. So we have a website for our RoboCamps. It's www.citruscircuits.org.
Oh, okay. I was gonna put the full thing. I don't know why. This website?
So www.citruscircuits.org.
This is gonna take forever.
We don't need to write the titles. So it's just
Okay.
/RoboCamps.
Oh my God.
/ robocamps.html. .html. And then we also have a resources page, which is, so the RoboCamps.html is for kind of our customers, if you will. Resources that are set up to help you guys is www.citruscircuits.org/robocamp-resources.html. RoboCamp-resources. Camp singular, that's a dash.
Oh.
RoboCamp-resources.html.
There's an R there.
And
Gee, I
also
don't know.
you can email us, admin@citruscircuits.org, and we can provide links. We're actually in the process of updating our RoboCamp guide, which is our documentation of how this past summer went. Because this was the first summer that we ran those K-3 camps, and so we're trying to incorporate that into our documentation. So once that is done, we'll have an updated guide, and we'll make that available to anybody who wants. So feel free to email us, admin@citruscircuits.org. And in addition, there's a QR code.
It's outside.
We're not showing, but
It's
there's
also
another
outside.
One,
Yeah.
There's another one on the sign out next to the door outside. So if you scan that and fill out the survey and include your email address, then we can send you a link to those guides once they're updated. So please, please, please fill out the survey. I know on the slide presentation we're going to get a 0. Yay us.
Yay.
But we do want your feedback, and especially we want to be able to share information with you. So please fill out the survey. Give us your email address if you want some of that information. With that, we've got a few minutes for questions. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I have a few. Should I just go one by one, I guess?
Sure.
The first one was like, how do you guys recruit participants for the camp again? Just like, because I think sometimes an issue that people might encounter, like you have everything set up, but like getting people to join the camp.
Yeah.
Go ahead, and I'll add to it.
We do it through our website. We'll have a link on there, as well as our social media page, and just flyers that we hand out since we every Saturday we go to our local farmers market, and so we have a booth there where we have little flyers, and if kids or parents come up, we can be like, hand them out and be like, hey, we have a summer camp if your kids are interested in building this or coding this.
So we also used to give out paper flyers at the elementary and middle schools for teachers to hand out to kids. And our school district has since gone to an electronic, what do you call it? Notice to parents, whatever, flyer. So again, part of planning in advance is we need to get that set up because they have like a month-long lead time before we can get things set out. But sending it to parents within the school district is obviously a very effective way of recruiting. So find out how your school district, if you have one, communicates events to parents of kids within the district, and see if you can get announcements to your camps advertised to the school district as well. In addition, we have a local newspaper. They're always desperate for material, so our business and media team will write up articles announcing our camps. We send it to the newspaper, and they're glad to publish it for us for free.
Yay.
Yay, newspapers. Anyone else? I'll come back to you. I just want to give other people. Yeah.
Okay. What age group do you recommend? Because I know you said you started out with 4th through 8th, but you also did K through 3rd. So what do you recommend?
Definitely 4th through 8th. Even if you have a smaller group, probably if you want to start doing maybe 6th through 8th, because those are the people that are going to be joining your team more than likely. So you can start with that, and then you can proceed to go down. As we said, we just started the K through 3rd after probably 10 years of experience of doing this. So it's they're definitely, it's harder to do younger grades because it's harder to keep them entertained. I would start off with the older.
It's a whole different curriculum. Yeah.
Just a follow-up, but I guess like what proportion of your kids are that middle school grade? Like, do a lot of those kids come, or is that a smaller proportion?
Since, yeah, so it's the, I'm trying to think.
I'd have to look it up. If you fill out the survey and post that question, we'll give you the exact figures. But we get a fair number of the middle schoolers in there, particularly for the advanced camps, and we offer one that's geared specifically towards programming as opposed to building the robot, and that also tends to get more of the upper age range as well. Anyone else?
How do you make sure the participants are engaged?
Usually you can tell by like body language, but also if you have maybe backup plans, if there's something like, oh, you see that they're taking longer to do something that everybody else is pretty much done with, you can gauge that like, okay, they're maybe not as interested in this. And you can kind of help them to work through it. A lot of times it'll work out because there'll be one kid that's really interested in building and one kid that's really interested in programming. Even though we try to mix it and like have them work together and work on the different sections, there'll always be a kid that's interested in it.
Okay, good, more?
Also something just might be maybe more personal, just like for like younger kids, maybe like 4th to 5th grade, like sometimes they're just like goofing off, like and you kind of want to tell them to like stop, right? So you guys mentioned like the 2 warning system, but also just as from my personal experience, it's like maybe a little hard sometimes to find the border between being too harsh on them and them kind of perceiving it as mean versus maybe being too lenient and them just kind of feeling okay, like I can still do whatever. So.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do on the Monday or the first day that we do it is we have the kids sit down and they come up with their own list of rules, and we'll have that on a whiteboard so they can constantly be referring back to it. The 2 warning system is for anything if they're going to get hurt, if we can potentially lose them / like them getting maybe kidnapped or something because we have to keep eyes on them, or just them plain out doing something that's not maybe just it's blatantly going against the rules that they have already came up with. That will be the 2 warning systems. But we haven't had much experience with having to use that, or at least the camp counselors don't. Head counselors will maybe have to do maybe 1 each week, but it's very like lenient. But not too lenient where they're just like goofing off the entire time since they set their own rules.
Yeah. One other thing too is to have distractions. So if you have, again, the floater counselors, and you have like basketballs or arts and crafts or puzzles or something that, if they're really not able or willing to focus on the robot for a little bit, you can divert them off to some other activity for a while to help calm them down. So having that flexibility built into your program will certainly help with, having to avoid discipline, in essence. Any other questions? No? So again, please scan the QR code next to the door if you don't mind, and we'd love your feedback. We'd love to be able to share information with you. And if you start up camps, we'd love to hear how they go. So yeah, please let us know. We hope everyone's able to be successful.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.